Welcome back to the channel. I've got the update interview with Phil Anderson. Earlier in February, before the war broke out in Russia, we were talking about recession fears, how it was impossible for 2022. So we've got a lot of things to recap and get answers to in today's interview with Phil, as it's been highly requested by you guys. So if you haven't seen the first interview, I'll leave a link to that in the video description as well. And for all of Phil's work, it'll be in the video description. Plus, I'll leave the videos at the end of this one as well. So stick around for this video. We've got lots of big questions that need answering because the world has changed in the last 3 months. I'll say a quick hello to Phil before I crack on with the rest of my intro. G'day, Phil.
Yeah, hello. We haven't changed much.
That's it. That's the interview done. 1 minute over. But before we get in with the ton of questions which you guys have been asking: interest rates, CPI, inflation, could the cycle be wrong, market crashing, real estate crashing, tons of stuff, money printing, how could this all be over now, and how could it keep going to 2026? Make sure you've liked and subscribed to the channel. And like I said, all of Phil's details will be in the video description as well, because we have a huge journey ahead of us for the next 5 or so years by the looks of it, even though people think it's all over now. So I guess that's a pretty good way to start. And by saying, could the cycle be wrong?
It's all over now, baby blue, right? Like I've said before, Jason, the one thing I learned when writing my book, I've noticed when people read my book, they don't have so many questions, because in my book, The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, I take people through the prior 11 cycles. Once you read the prior 11 cycles, you realize that what's happening now is precisely the same repeat at exactly the same time.
So if Phil's talking about the book, I mention it all the time.
Yeah, before we get there. I did say to you, you've been a subscriber of mine a long time.
Very long time.
You got my roadmap in very early January 2022, and I said in that roadmap, and the roadmap showed clearly, what I do, what my roadmap is an overlay of the Dow, the US market, going back to 1890 something or other. And I overlay each year of the Dow, but only in set timeframes. That's the secret, only in set timeframes. When you do that, the overlay clearly showed that the US markets were going to go lower this year. Now, here's something else that your readers can do. I am astounded every time why more people don't see this. What I want your listeners and your viewers, what I want them to do is to pull up a chart of the Dow. Go to barchart.com or somewhere else if they haven't got the data.
We'll do it on the channel. We do it many times. Yep.
Okay. Go back as far back as you can and have a look at the years of the Dow. So you have a look at 2015. You have a look at 2008. You have a look at 2001. You have a look at 1994. You have a look at 1987.
If you haven't picked up, he's doing years of 7.
80 years of 7. Every 7 years, the Dow has a thumping down year. Every single time. You can go back to 1900 to have a look at that. Now, some years are worse than others, but this year was due to be a serious stock market retracement. It's not a crash. It's a normal retracement of an up move, and it'll come back by 50% of that up move. And it just seems to happen. And this number 7, which is a key, and it's a key because it's 360 weeks. 360 weeks is a circle. And this is what markets do. So I don't understand why this is catching everybody by surprise. It was due to happen. Now, you talk about recession and things. Well, it depends. Your definition of recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. Now, we've had one. Maybe we might get 2, and then everybody will jump up and say that's a recession. But it depends what you're talking about. If you're a crypto billionaire last week, then this is a depression for you. It's not a recession.
True, especially if you held Luna.
Yes, if you're just a normal working sort of guy or woman in a job that's providing good service and it's a pretty good economy, I don't think you'll even remember what this was all about. Most people are not in the market, so they won't recall it much. And at this time in the cycle, what I learned from my book is real estate, it's just not in a position where it's going to decline. We need a pause after what happened the last year or two upwards like that, but
Sure.
there's just no reason for real estate to be declining at all. And if the land price doesn't go down much, then any recession that we get can be dealt with the normal moves of interest rates and everything else.
So
But
let's just go back to say, could the cycle
yeah,
be wrong? You've basically said no because of the last 200 and something years. There was just a few points that you brought up there in case people are just tuning in and have never heard of the 18.6 year cycle, or followed any of your work or my work and are just tuning in for now because we have the crystal ball. You were saying go back to the 11 past cycles, and those
yes,
cycles are approximately 18 to 20 years. So if we do
yes.
11
Well,
times 20, it's about 220 years of data. That's what you were saying
yes,
first up.
yes.
So
And
the cycle can't be
people
wrong.
who've, no, it could be. Well, I
Could
don't
be.
have, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. This is in the lap of the
Short
gods
term.
for what that sort of stuff happens. But the structure of the economy can be forecast when you realise or understand that when the economic rent is enclosed, you must get a cycle of up and down. It must, absolutely 100% certain. And I went through that in the great, talk we did down there on the Gold
Yeah.
Coast
So
when I was in Australia.
we did a live event here on the Gold Coast in April of 2022. We'll have that recording available in the next few days, and probably by
Yes,
the time you've seen this,
yeah,
it'll be in the video description as well. So if you want
yeah.
to tune into
That's an
that goes into a lot of detail.
Yeah, that's an absolute must. You have to watch that because you'll get to understand. I take people through what economic rent is, what happens when it's enclosed, and why you must get a cycle. So when people eventually get to read my Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, and when they go through the past cycles, it dawns on them that what's actually happening now is just a repeat of the cycle, almost at exactly the same time. Now, let me explain that for people who haven't heard that before, but my subscribers are up with it. History is just usually repeats. The future will repeat a composite of what happened in the past, and the two key numbers are 20 years and 60 years. And 60 years ago was quite a significant down move in the Dow, and 20 years ago was a significant move in the Nasdaq. By October 2002, the Nasdaq was down 75%. I'm not expecting the same this time, but there's further to go down. The Nasdaq was down 75% by October 2002. Some of the companies, I remember companies like Pet.com and a few other absolutely insane internet ideas that got funding that were just never going to work. By 2002, end of 2002, they were out of business. But other good ideas and internet companies survived the downturn. After 2002, they went on to do bigger and better things. Now, 2002, 2003 is the same time in the last cycle, as where we are now. Markets go up, stock markets go up, stock markets go down, but that's within the real estate cycle itself, and it's the real estate cycle that's more important. So that's the sort of stuff that's happening. So things recovered after 2002. They'll do so again in 2022, and we'll go on to bigger and better things next year, year after.
So maybe we'll address the recession. Is it possible? Because in the last time, it was early February before Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah.
We're saying recession is impossible. So if you're using
Yeah,
the
but
strict definition,
it depends. It depends. When I said recession's impossible, I was to my understanding, when I say recession's impossible, that is suggesting that we can't get a real estate downturn. That's why I say it's impossible. Okay,
Yeah,
we might get 2 quarters of negative growth, which might, by economist definition, satisfy something of some sort of downturn or recession. But by the time you get to 2004, you'll look back on it and you'll think, well, who noticed that? There was nothing that happened because land price didn't decline. So when I say recession's impossible, I'm assuming that's just not going to include a land price decline, because if you get a land price decline, then it gets really serious because everybody feels it. Okay, so
That could
that's
be more
what
of a
I was
depression,
referring to.
which is a
Yeah.
good point, because your main focus and your main studies for the last 30 odd years has been around land and real
Yes.
estate.
Real
And of course,
estate,
stock
yes.
markets, but real estate is
Yes.
the primary focus. Whereas
Yeah, that's
now
right.
with everyone online, everyone is sort of focusing on stock markets and crypto markets. So, and they just see what the Fed is saying, and they focus heavily on a recession in that regard. But land is where it's at. That's what will bring the market come crashing down.
Yes, and that's not
So-
going to happen at the moment. This is just a normal, in the stock markets in the US, this is a normal retracement. It's entirely normal. There's nothing abnormal about it. What goes up has to retrace, and as it does retrace, and I think we'll get more downside moves. First week of July is a good week to watch for a possible bottom.
So maybe we're
and again in
balancing out at the
October.
moment.
Yeah, we have to
Getting a bit of a
have
low
some
at the
sort of
moment.
yeah. We have to have that has to happen for markets to actually go up further. That's how stock markets work. Actually, you have to have retracements of anywhere between 30 and 50% for the market to balance, become a little bit stronger, for all the money that was it's value based, waiting for retracements to happen. And there's a lot of professional money that sits on the sideline to wait for dark days like we had last week, and we will get again in another month or two. They then bring in all the money because they see that the stock market's actually worth more, and they're getting better value, and it's that money that causes the low to come in because the prices are then supported. So
why do you think
this is just normal behaviour?
Why do you think people pay so much attention to CPI data, inflation data, and all that sort of thing? Do you think it's worthwhile paying a lot of attention to that?
Not in the bigger scheme of things. No, it doesn't mean anything in the bigger scheme of things. The thing you have to watch in the larger scheme, the larger picture, is what happens to land value. And nobody does that. You'll never get those figures anywhere else. So I'm the only guy that seems to do it. That's because land is not considered part of mainstream economics. So they don't look at it. So what you're reading from the normal mainstream economists, they're all going to be wrong.
I love it. Interest rate hikes is another big topic, and obviously interest rates going up should bring land prices down.
Have a look at your history. So your listeners and viewers, again, go back and have a look at the Dow. Go back and have a look at history. Interest rates went up after 2003. So did land price. Interest rates went up in 1994. So did land price. Interest rates went up in 1986, 87, 88, 89, thereabouts roughly. So did land price. In fact, the biggest gains of all time happened between 86 and 89. It was just a massive move. And in between it, in 1987, we had one of the all-time biggest stock market crashes. It's preposterous to suggest that land prices have to come down because interest rates go up. It's just not the case. You have to overlay everything that's happening now with where we are in the real estate cycle. And there's very strong evidence to suggest that land prices in the United States go up 14 years from the lows. The lows were 2012. There's 11 cycles to suggest that that's the case. I still think that that this one will complete into 2026.
What about the peaks of the real estate cycle?
Jason, I can tell you 100% sure. If 100%. In the United, yes, 100% sure. If in the United States it began to look like land prices or house prices, that's what everybody sees. If it began to look like house prices would start to decline, the interest rates movements up would stop. The Fed would stop that cycle, I tell you.
And what about the end of the cycle?
Yeah, but you can judge. We're not at the end of the cycle. We're just talking about now.
Okay.
And people seem to be panicking now about all sorts of things. But the yield curve in the United States is steepening. Okay, that suggests that there's stronger economic activity on the way. It's steepening. So the difference between the long bond and the short dated curve is steepening at the moment. So it's nothing. This is just a normal retracement.
Are you saying the 2-year and the 10-year? Is that the curve that you're looking at?
The Fed funds rate and the 10-year bond.
All right. So in terms of the interest rate hikes that are happening now, this is not enough, because we're not at the end of the cycle. This is not enough to flip the market, flip real estate to head down from this point.
All right, so you have to be careful what you're talking about. You say it's not enough to flip the market. What market? It is enough. It is enough to bring about a normal retracement of the United States stock market. And I said to all my subscribers at the beginning of this year, I'm on record as having said it, that will be one item that probably causes the United States stock market to have a retrace. I also, in my roadmap that I produced, my 2022 roadmap, that if people subscribe to my service, they'll get the chance to read it. I issued that, I think, January 4, first week of January. I said to you this would be a big year. We had what's called the Schmidt year, which is every 7 years, and we had a number of other cycles coming in that
Just
would
say that,
bring
what was
about
the
some
Schmidt
sort
year?
of. That's every 7
Hebrew
years.
thing.
It comes from the Torah. Every 7 years,
Right.
360 weeks. Okay,
Right.
that's well known. It's known by some people within markets. If you go back and Google Schmidt, you'll see it. Some guy back in 2015 put out a huge big summary of what that all was, and it all seemed to get buried and forgotten after that.
Just in case other people want to actually do the research and look at it.
Yeah,
I just wanted to mention it. Yeah.
But the place to
It's an important
start is to just take out a subscription to what I do and then see all the history and
I
then go and
agree.
research it yourself. Now I forgot the original question.
No, we're just talking about the market crash in terms of flipping with the interest rates. And
there we go.
Stock market and real estate is different.
It just depends. It depends what you're talking about. So what I was saying, if you're talking about market, real estate and stuff, this is just part of the normal retracement that has to happen when you get the up move. There's nothing abnormal about it, I see, at least not yet. But if you're talking about real estate, we've still got the cycle to complete. So we need to sometimes be a little bit careful of our definitions and what it is precisely that we're talking about. Because the economy is different and the stock market is different to real estate. They move to different things sometimes, and the stock market is much more reactive and has its own cycles, whereas real estate's a lot more steady and tends to show in the United States 14 years up, 4 down. And it just moves within that. I hope that makes sense.
Does that mean the stock market could top out before the real estate, and we'll see a peak in the stock market in 2024? Just throwing numbers out there.
Anything's possible, but I doubt it. Usually, Akil's got some information. Akil, my co-director at Property Sharemarket Economics, he's got some information coming out shortly, I think, probably tomorrow or the day after, where he has had a look at what the markets, what the FTSE, the Japanese market, the Australian market, what the Dow has done in the second half of every cycle. And normally from the bottom of every second half, and I would consider that, say, March of 2020 as the bottom of the start of the second half of the real estate cycle. Akil has shown, if you take the second half of every real estate cycle back at least, I think 4 cycles he's done.
So about 80 years, yeah.
The minimum move in the Dow from the bottom price of the start of the second half of the real estate cycle, the minimum move is to double. So that could take the Dow to about 47,000 by the time we finish in 2026. That would be my expectation. Okay, so
minimum,
yeah, minimum, yes. That's should history repeat in the second half of the cycle as to what the stock market usually does. Okay, and that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Big call, but like you said, it's already shown in history over the last 4 cycles, 80 years, minimum 100% from these.
Minimum doubling, doubling, yes. From the bottom,
doubling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Not from this point. Yep.
No,
from that
not
bottom
from this point. From the bottom point, yes.
All right.
So we're on the way.
Keep tracking
we're
that.
on the way. And if people want to read, the stuff I produced about, the Dow in a decade, every decade, if you go back 100 and something years, the Dow has only ever made 3 particular patterns, and it depends on which year in the decade it bottoms. Now we had the Dow bottom in the decade of 2020. We had a higher low since then. If this proves higher, if the low we get this year is higher than 2020, which it should be, that sets us up for a very strong decade coming. Okay, so they're the patterns. So that's what I study, and that's what we look at with history. So I think this could be quite exciting from here.
And 2022 then is the year, probably one of the last years of low prices, low opportunities before we take the next run.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, that would be what history suggests. Yeah, it could be very exciting now after we get through this year. Now that doesn't mean it will happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just looking at history, and I'm the only person in the world, as you know, that looks at those things in the context of a real estate cycle, a first half of the real estate cycle, which takes 7 years, then the mid-cycle slowdown, and then the second half of the real estate cycle, which takes another 7 years. So second half of the real estate cycle started roughly 2020, 7 years up from there. I think we're still going. So the stock market's showing its usual normal retracements within that. And that's just how I see it. Could I be wrong? Well, of course, I don't have the perfect crystal ball, but I'm sure, as you've seen, we've got information that's been pretty seriously good for people if they really genuinely want to understand markets.
I've seen it for at least a decade now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've been following for a decade. It's been on point. So looking towards that later part of 2026, specifically talking about the real estate peak, not necessarily the stock market peak.
That's correct. Yes. Land price peak. Yes.
Land price peak, which means the stock market could carry on a little bit longer.
Could carry, yes, it could. We'd have to judge that when we get there and see what's happening.
We're still 4 or 5 years away from that.
Worry about what's happening tomorrow.
Talking about tomorrow, 2022, May, we're seeing a bottom now. Do you think this is a temporary bottom or the final bottom for the year?
I think I don't think we'll see much of a bounce back upwards from here. It won't be very strong, and the market will probably, again, I'm basing that on what I do with my roadmap. That indicates that we'll probably get a bit of a move sideways a bit along the lows here for a month or two. It'll have to allow the markets to strengthen a little bit. The market will want to see the US interest rate rise cycle. They want to see that sort of finish, and they want to see that the Fed will come out and say, well, we're done now. We're back up to about where it should be, 3%, 3.5%, the Fed funds rate. That's back to about average, normal. The market will be happy to see that. The stock market will then look at the company earnings, and if earnings are forecast to be stronger next year than this year, and look at the year after, then people will start buying in because they're buying earnings cheap this year because they'll be priced more expensive the year after, which is then back to your story. So it'll depend on what earnings do towards the end of the year. But if earnings keep coming in fairly strongly, and then if I happen to think that the Chinese, they'll have to reverse engineer what they're doing with their complete shutdown to beat COVID. It's just it's lunacy what's going on over there. It's the height of arrogance to think that a government can completely beat nature. It's just never going to happen.
I said that in March 2020 when all this stuff started to my local gym here. They were like, "What do you think's going to happen?" And I'm like, "Well, it's nature. You just have to let it run its course. And people die. This is what happens. Let it run its course." And I'm like, "It'll be over in a few weeks." I was so wrong with that. I didn't think people were so stupid that we had to try and lock everyone up over a virus. But anyway,
we'd have been in hindsight. But I think what I said at the time. It would have been much better to just simply. I accept in the beginning a couple of weeks where we've got to think about what we're doing because we didn't quite know what we're dealing with. But after that, improve your health, get used to what might be coming. I'm okay if people want to if we invented a bit of a vaccine, I'm okay if people want to take that. That's all right, like a flu shot and stuff to build for people who are a bit suffer a bit more. But after that, you've just got to let things settle. Nature's nature. It's just going to throw things at us all the time. But humanity survives. It's never been such a big deal. And get on with it. Manage the risk and get on with stuff. Sweden did this quite well. There was nothing wrong. But the Chinese, the government there, it is total lunacy to be thinking that that they can just beat the virus. Now, having said that, with China, the lockdowns and everything else, total lunacy. But I do support some of the other stuff that they're doing. They've been cleaning up the streets, and they conditions in some Asian places can be pretty ratty at times, and there's a lot of people that they deal with. There's 1 billion people in China, so cleaning up the streets and doing the normal things and just making it a little bit less easy for people to mingle rubbish, the normal rubbish, the streets, and disinfecting some of those corners where there are a lot of animals and things like that. That's all good stuff to be doing. The Chinese are doing all that. They know to do that, right? That's the normal thing that
I'll mention that if you don't
should
mind,
be doing anyway. Yeah,
exactly. You live in Asia, so
I do. Yes,
I
do.
You've been there for many years. Yeah.
Yes. Jason, I should send you a picture. Just today, I was walking out of I'm in a reasonably nice area of Jakarta, just near Pondoginda, right? So, but I don't live here. I travel a bit, right? But just today they were cleaning up the rubbish, right, with the rubbish truck coming through. Yes, but it's done by hand, right? The rubbish truck comes through. The rubbish is put in a cement barrier. It's dug up. People have got a plastic cup and handle, and then they put it in a plastic bag and they throw it onto the truck, right? This is not what Westerners are used to, right? So I support any activities that the society should be doing that actually automates this process and actually makes it a much cleaner process. You wonder why people get ill and stuff, what they're doing, and don't look after their health properly, right? This was way before COVID, and nothing's being done. We spend millions and millions on trying to inoculate people when the obvious thing to do is to have better and more efficient waste disposal and cleaning streets. I mean, Jason, it's insane. Hygiene. It's insane. Hygiene stuff. It's insane what governments do, right? And then the whole thing about where we were in lockdown and having all the stuff we were having to do with the vaccines and the virus and all the stuff that the governments are telling us to do. And then what happens? Putin invades Ukraine, right? As if to say, who gives a shit? Putin wants to send he needs to defend his countryside, and America starts getting upset, and they send all these, now, what is it, 30 billion to defend Ukraine. Why can't we spend 30 billion on hospitals and streets? Jason, it's absolutely insane, I'll tell you. Sorry for the French, but and I'm sure
you also live in France too, so I know you know French.
Yes. Yeah. So complaining about a vaccine, it was pushed by the drug companies, complaining about a vaccine when there's far many other things we could have been doing that were more sane in producing better health responses. Just bananas. Anyway, don't get me started.
We started. I think there are a lot of people that agree. There are obviously a lot of people that still think it's a real thing, and obviously I'm not.
But we can't say much, right? Because we get censored. You try and put it up on social media to talk about take better vitamin D and look after your health and all the stuff that you can be doing. And government doesn't like it, so they don't let us say it. It's just,
This is your platform today, Phil. We've got a lot of people to talk with about this. So far, we've been hitting the mark with everything in terms of the cycle, the crash. Everything is normal as is. I think there was just a couple more things that people had in terms of questions of how this can actually be happening. Money printing. We'll go back to the governments and that, because obviously at the end of the day, the big idea here is to get people to be aware of the real estate cycle, so that hopefully sometime in the future we can cause some massive change whereby governments are reduced to this, stop wasting money on wars and stupidity, and actually help the people. That's the whole point, I think, from your end, and that's why I do what I do here. Try and help people learn from the past. Money printing, that's what everyone believed has shot this market up, and I guess we could say possibly that is a big thing. If they're not going to keep printing money, or are they going to keep printing money because of inflation? If they don't keep printing money, can the market still go up? I think that's my roundabout question.
Markets will go up if earnings increase. If in the US, if corporate earnings increase, any company in the United States that listed that increases its earnings, people will buy now, and that must.
They're not going up because of inflation.